Someone collapses on a crowded train platform. 40 people are standing right there. Nobody moves. You've probably seen a video like this online and felt a flash of judgment. You told yourself you would be different. You would be the one who helps. But the real answer is far stranger, and it has almost nothing to do with how kind you are. Picture it happening to you. You're in a packed room. Smoke starts leaking in from under a door. Everyone else just sits there, glancing around, doing nothing. What do? Most people say they'd act immediately. Most people are wrong. In the 1960s, two psychologists became obsessed with a single question. Why do people freeze when someone needs help? John Darley and Biblatani weren't interested in cowardice. They were interested in something colder and more mechanical. They wanted to know what happens inside your brain the moment a stranger's life depends on a choice you have seconds to make. Their research began after a case that shocked an entire country. A young woman named Kitty Genovese was attacked outside her apartment building in New York City in 1964. Reports at the time claimed dozens of neighbors heard her cries and did nothing. The exact details of that night were later disputed and partly exaggerated by early news coverage. But the question the case raised was real, and it refused to go away. If so many people were present, why didn't anyone step in? Darley and Latani built an experiment to test it directly. They put a single participant in a room with an intercom, told them they were talking to other participants in separate rooms, and then staged one of those participants having a medical emergency over the speaker. Sometimes the subject believed they were the only one who could hear it. Sometimes they believed several other people could hear it too. Here's where it gets strange. When people believed they were the only witness, the vast majority acted fast. Almost all of them left the room to get help within a minute. But when people believed others were listening too, something in them slowed down. Fewer of them acted. And the ones who did wait, waited far longer than the ones who thought they were alone. Nothing about the emergency had changed. Only the number of witnesses had changed. Your instinct might be to call this cruelty. It isn't. It's arithmetic. Darley and Latani named it diffusion of responsibility. When you are the only person who can act, the full weight of that responsibility sits on you alone. There is nowhere for it to go. But the moment other people are present, your brain quietly splits that weight between everyone in the room. If 10 people are watching, some deep and ancient part of you calculates that your personal share of the obligation is smaller. 10% of a duty feels a lot lighter than all of it. There's a second force working alongside it, and it's even sneakier. Psychologists call it pluralistic ignorance. Think about that train platform again. A man is lying on the ground. Is he having a medical emergency, or is he just drunk and asleep? You look around for a clue. So does everyone else. And what do you see? Calm faces. Nobody rushing. Nobody looking alarmed. You read their stillness as information. If this were truly serious, surely someone else would already be reacting. So you match their calm, and they match yours, and now an entire platform of people is silently reassuring each other that nothing is wrong, using nothing but each other's blank expressions as evidence. Everyone is performing calm for everyone else. Nobody is actually calm. It's a strange kind of trap. You're not copying confidence, you're copying uncertainty and mistaking it for confidence. For decades, this theory sat quietly inside psychology textbooks as settled fact. Then, in 2011, a researcher named Peter Fisher led a large review pulling together data from decades of bystander studies conducted all over the world. What he found added an important twist. The bystander effect was real, but it wasn't fixed. It shrank dramatically in situations that were unmistakably dangerous. When a threat was violent or clearly life-threatening, people were far more likely to intervene, crowd or no crowd. The freeze response was strongest in exactly the situations you'd expect, the ambiguous ones, the moments where nobody could be completely sure what was happening. That detail matters more than it seems. It means the bystander effect isn't really about apathy. It's about uncertainty multiplied by an audience. Take away the ambiguity, and people show up. Add witnesses to a confusing situation, and everyone quietly waits for someone else to decide it's real first. Now here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. This isn't a flaw in weak or uncaring people. It shows up in almost everyone, including people who consider themselves deeply compassionate. It shows up in trained professionals. It shows up in rooms full of people who would tell you, with complete sincerity, that they'd never just stand there. Why would evolution build something so seemingly broken into you? Because for most of human history, you weren't a lone individual assessing a stranger on a train platform. You lived in a tight group of maybe 20 to 50 people, and almost everyone in your field of vision was someone you knew, someone whose reactions you had years of history reading correctly. Watching the group's response wasn't laziness back then. It was often the fastest, most reliable way to detect real danger because the people around you had context you didn't. A raised eyebrow from someone who'd survived 40 winters in that same valley meant something. Following the group wasn't a bug. It was, for most of your species' existence, a genuinely smart shortcut. The problem is that Shortcut was built for small bands of familiar faces, not for anonymous crowds of total strangers standing shoulder to shoulder without knowing a single thing about each other. Your ancient wiring still treats a subway car full of strangers the same way it once treated a hunting group of relatives. It still borrows their calm as information. It still divides the responsibility evenly among however many bodies happen to be standing nearby, even when those bodies have no idea who you are and never will. So, what actually breaks the freeze? Researchers have found a surprisingly simple answer, and it comes down to specificity. Vague appeals to a crowd rarely work because everyone assumes the appeal is meant for someone else. But single someone out directly, point at one exact person, and the entire psychological trap collapses instantly. Say, you in the red jacket call an emergency number, and diffusion of responsibility has nowhere left to hide. The responsibility isn't split anymore, it has a single name attached to it. It's just you. This single piece of knowledge has been used to train emergency responders, flight attendants, and workplace safety officers for years now. It's not a trick, it's a direct patch for a bug installed in your brain roughly 100,000 years before it or anyone ever needed it. Think about how often this plays out in your life in miniature, far from any emergency. A group project where nobody sends the first message, quietly hoping someone else will start it. A group chat with an unanswered question sitting there for hours because 30 people saw it and all 30 assumed somebody else would reply first. A mistake in a meeting that everyone privately notices and nobody points out, because pointing it out alone feels heavier than staying silent inside a group. You've done this. Not because you're indifferent, because your brain is still running code written for tribes of 30, trying its best to make sense of a species that now spends its days packed into crowds of thousands of strangers it will never learn to read. So back to that train platform, the one you imagined at the very start. Someone collapses. 40 people are standing there. You now know exactly why so many of them might hesitate, and exactly why you might too, even if you're certain you never would. But you also know the one thing that dissolves it instantly. Not more courage, not more compassion, just one word aimed at one face. You.